Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and you know what? What are video games supposed to be above all else? Fun, of course. I mean, it's the highest level of escapist entertainment where players can be transported to far-flung worlds and play a more active role in proceedings than any other media form. And while it's a pretty basic general rule of business not to make your customers ever feel like they're stupid, well, these 10 video games just dared to do that, for better or worse. Whether it being a small facet of gameplay or a more prevailing component, in each case players were left exasperated, frustrated, and perhaps occasionally amused that the game dared to question their intellect quite so blatantly. So let's hit the books and wise up, my friends, as I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games that made us look like idiots. Number 10. Try jumping off. Dark Souls. To the untrained observer, Dark Souls players already look plenty foolish, flinging themselves headlong into the same tough encounter over and over again in what is surely the gaming equivalent of slamming your head into a brick wall, but the brick wall also has spikes and laughs at you for doing so. But there's also another aspect of the series which harbours an altogether more infuriating potential, to get the better of players just as they let their guard down. Now, the franchise allows players to leave notes for others to read, and because this involves the internet, some, of course, use the system to troll others. We've all fallen, quite literally in this case, for at least a note or two left on a cliff edge which says something like "try jumping off" or "treasure below." Curiosity has a habit of getting the better of us, and we quickly realise that we've made a fatal mistake only as we're plummeting to our death. It can provide a little moment of comedy if you're not too far away from a bonfire, but if you spy this miles away and jump off, then well, you're going to feel like an idiot and have a red face. Number 9. The EPSILON missions. Grand Theft Auto 5. Grand Theft Auto 5 may be a wonderful game, but it's also one which relishes making fun of players who actually expect something neat in return for completing time-consuming side content. The infamous What Lies Beneath side mission isn't bad enough just by its own merits, which asks players to painstakingly collect 30 submarine parts only to be rewarded with $10 and a signed photo. The game's series of EPSILON missions make an art form out of treating players like idiots. So EPSILON is basically the Scientology-like cult which Michael can join as a side mission, opening up a branch of quests which generally require him to do busy work such as wearing Epsilon robes for 10 days straight or walking for 5 miles in the desert. But the last mission, Unknowing the Truth, promises that Michael will finally receive limitless knowledge after helping deliver $2.1 million in apocalypse funds to a waiting helicopter. But upon doing so, you actually being ended up gifted a rusty tractor. The delicious irony, of course, is that players who followed the entire questline expecting a real payoff fell into the exact same trap that real cult victims do. At least in GTA 5 there's an alternate option. You can decide to kill the Epsilon goons and make off with the $2.1 million yourself. Who's the idiot now? Number 8. Sanity Effects. Eternal Darkness, SANITY'S Requiem. The ludicrously underappreciated Eternal Darkness, SANITY'S Requiem remains one of the most unique and creative survival horror games of the last 20 years. Though a cursory glance at the game, which sees players fighting off supernatural monsters in a series of ornate locations, suggests a brazen Resident Evil ripoff, Eternal Darkness actually has its own totally unique, ingenious tricks up its sleeve. The game's distinguishing hook is its sanity effects, a series of perception-altering events which will occur if the player lets their in-game sanity meter slip too low. These effects can include subtle changes in the environment, or like altered camera angles, or more outlandish elements like fake console crashes, random deaths, and the volume of your TV appearing to adjust itself. Though the latter effect doesn't work so well in the age of HD TV, which has long since abandoned the green volume bars, the tricks are generally still varied and convincing enough that at least a few of them are sure to catch players totally unawares. Yes, even in the year of our more media-savvy Lord 2020, Eternal Darkness is still a game which can giddily confuse players, even if you think that you've got the better of it. Number 7. The PESKY Pro Pull-Ups, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Despite being totally optional, Final Fantasy VII Remake's infamous pull-up minigame has left fans foaming at the mouth with rage, infuriated that such a seemingly simple activity is so bloody hard to master. The game's subreddit is full of posts by irate players who've spent hours of their lives trying to defeat the third and final pull-up challenger, Jules, hello, whose skill offers up an insanely small margin of error. Just like in real life, my friends, I'm clearly the body Adonis of the group. While on the surface it might seem like a simple QTE minigame, it has a tendency to throw input curveballs at players just as they're getting into a groove, and because recovering from a mistake may take many precious seconds, a single screw-up can ruin an entire run. To make matters worse, players need to beat the challenge in order to obtain Final Fantasy VII's Remake's Platinum Trophy. This resulted in players coming up with elaborate elaborate strategies for just about getting through it, such as turning the volume down and even covering up Jules with a sheet to avoid being distracted by him. Wow, that sounds like my love life. If your significant other enters the room and sees you freaking out over losing a digital pull-up competition for the 15th time while the left-hand side of your TV is covered with a spared bedsheet, there's no talking your way out of that one and will make you look a right tit. Number 6. The end credits fake out. Hitman Blood Money. Hitman Blood Money seemingly concludes with Agent 47's luck finally running out as he's fatally poisoned by his double-crossing handler Diana. After the scene shifts to Agent 47's funeral, the end credits begin to roll, and that seems to be all she wrote. And indeed, if you simply watch the credits play without touching your controller, Agent 47 ends up being cremated for realsies. But the actual intended route, as many players didn't actually discover until later, is to move the controller, waking Agent 47 from his simulated death, knowingly caused by Diana, and then interrupting the credits in the process. Players are then given free rein to slaughter every last person in the church, wiping out an entire fleet of 47's mortal enemies in one fell swoop. And so anyone duped by the death fake-out gave themselves a swift kick in the arse when they remembered that just like Keith Richards, Agent 47 cannot be killed by conventional means. Number 5. Overthinking puzzles. Portal. The Portal games are some of the most creative and intelligent puzzlers on the market, and though they're generally not too difficult for the average player to get through, they do occasionally make us feel like utter idiots. The problem, inevitably, is that Portal takes real-world physics and experiments with them in totally unique ways, allowing for players to maintain momentum as they slingshot themselves through portals to scale otherwise unreachable areas. As such, a singular, uncharted approach to physics practically invites players to overthink the puzzles laid before them. And so who amongst us hasn't found themselves stumped on one of the series' levels for way too long, only to eventually discover that the solution was much simpler than they expected? That's both the beauty and the curse of the Portal games, really, that they're so elegantly designed as to completely tire players in knots of confusion and then unravel them when we finally discover what's what. Number 4. The plastic skateboard peripheral. Tony Hawk's Ride. This one still annoys me. You paid £120 to look like an utter idiot in your front room and not be able to use the board correctly because the game was utter garbage. You're an idiot for buying it, you're an idiot for using it, and you're an idiot for believing that this was ever going to be good. I'm talking to myself here. Number 3. Deceptive difficulty. Trials. Though a fleeting glimpse at any of the Trials games might suggest that they're simple, breezy, physics-based racing games, that actually couldn't be much further from the truth. Trials is noted for its maddening level of difficulty once you plow your way through the earlier courses, and by the game's end, only the most obsessive players have even a hope in hell of traversing the butthole-puckering physics challenges on offer here. Indeed, the Trials franchise is actually a masterpiece of deceptive simplicity, because though the gameplay is limited to just a few buttons, the bikes respond so sensitively to your inputs that even the faintest flicker in the wrong direction can spell disaster. And so that simple-looking arcadey bike game that you thought you'd have some chill fun time with has now left you on the verge of snapping your controller over your knee, angry tears in your eyes. How has it come to this point? Once you've spent a solid 20 minutes trying to scale a ridiculously steep ramp to no avail, how could you not feel a little bit daft? Number 2. The Chicken Hat. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. The Metal Gear Solid franchise certainly has a history of making players look stupid. I mean, how many of us spent hours trying to figure out Meryl's codec frequency in the original game only to discover that it was literally on the back of the game case all along? Hideo Kojima's stealth action franchise also trolled players with the iconic Psycho Mantis boss fight, which required players to move their controller to the second port, and of course Metal Gear Solid 3's tricksy non-boss battle against the Sorrow, which could only be beaten by taking the revival pill. But Metal Gear Solid 5 took things to a whole other level that anyone struggling with the game's unprecedented open-world gameplay. Players who die or fail missions enough will receive a prompt asking if they'd like to don a chicken hat, which will make them near invisible to enemies and therefore greatly reduce the game's difficulty. But the compromise? Well, they literally have to wear a cartoon chicken's head as a hat, ensuring that they won't ever forget the fact that they're effectively playing the game as baby's first Metal Gear. While on the one hand it's hilarious and totally optional, it also ensures that more novice players seeking a helping hand will be forced to look like a total goof for as long as they choose to wear it. And number 1, actually expecting a satisfying ending. Mass Effect 3. For its first 2 games, Mass Effect was held up as a landmark sci-fi RPG, a densely detailed, narrative-focused adventure which took stock of player choice as its story progressed. BioWare promised fans that the climactic third game would offer up a certain amount of narrative granularity, with particular regard to its ending, ensuring that player choice across the trilogy would pay off in a dynamic way. But of course, Mass Effect 3 was widely pilloried for an ending which cast all of that promise aside and effectively just asked players to pick one of 3 colours in order to receive a pre-baked ending. Though BioWare did release an extended ending to try and paper over the upset, the damage was already done. Not only did fans feel duped by BioWare for failing to deliver on its promises, but many felt stupid for having invested so much of themselves in a storyline and characters which were eventually serviced so unsatisfactorily. The message that the game sent to players was that they were silly for becoming wrapped up in the epic sweeping story, which, going by the tepid commercial performance of follow-up Mass Effect Andromeda, may have been enough to ice the franchise for the foreseeable future. So here's a pro tip for EA: don't make your customers feel like they're dumb for believing in your product. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video games that made us look like idiots. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. If you want to chat to me further, you can do so over on Twitter at RetroJ, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice as my personal gaming channel where I stream every single Wednesday and Sunday. But before I go, my friends, I just want to say one thing. We detailed today a lot about video games that made us feel like idiots. And you know what? Mistakes that we make in our lives, they can indeed make us feel a little bit stupid from time to time. But you know what? We all make mistakes, my friends. Nobody is perfect, so if you have the capacity, forgive yourself for mistakes of the past and try to be better in the future. Learn from your mistakes, learn from where you went wrong, gain some perspective, and approach situations with confidence, understanding, and empathy. And trust me, you will live a long, healthy, and happy life if you do all of those things. Take care of yourself, you big ledge. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.